Hey, dear listeners, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping for this particular release. Just had a variety of hiccups with this one. First, I haven't had as much time to dedicate towards working on the show lately. This has just been a very busy year, very eventful, and also just quite crazy in terms of what's going on in the world lately. And I seem to have very little time both for myself as well as the things I'm interested in these days, it seems. But I do want to keep this project going and put whatever effort I can where I can. Now, with this episode in particular, me and John were in the booth recording this one, and we wanted to talk about the inspiring and very principled wave of campus encampments across the country, and in particular the ones here in Michigan. And we had some issues. I don't know what happened, whether it was a hardware failure or some kind of internet issue, but my audio was completely botched. Um, so this is my attempt to salvage the episode by re-recording my audio and kind of phantom stitching in John's audio into some kind of completed episode. As well as that, for some original context, we recorded this on the 29th of May, and we were quite optimistic in regards to certain current events at the time. Mainly, we were talking about the Wayne State campus encampment. And at the time, I don't think we're going to edit out the context of the interview. I don't want to erase that moment of optimism and hope we had in our session, in our recording, but probably pretty much 12 hours or so after we had concluded the recording of this episode, the encampment was shut down. So I'll be reading here from an article that was published 7:10 a.m. May 30th from the Detroit Free Press. So 12 people were arrested after police cleared tent encampment against Israel at Wayne State University. Police have shut down a tent encampment protesting Israel at Wayne State University and arrested several demonstrators, an official with the university said. The move was applauded by supporters of Israel and slammed by the country's opponents, reflecting deep divisions in Metro Detroit over the Israel-Hamas conflict. Very interesting choice of words. It was the latest tense moment in Michigan as protests and the other events have increasingly made the region a hotspot for activity related to the nearly 8-month conflict. Just before 5:30 a.m., University Police, with Detroit Police as backup, moved in to break up the encampment that was set up a week ago on May 23rd. The day after it was set up, a controversial 3-day conference, People's Conference for Palestine, drew left-wing activists from across the country, some of whom came to the encampment to show their support. Quote, occupants of the encampment are gone. Matt Lockwood, a spokesman for Wayne State, told the Free Press this morning, so the morning of the 30th. And the cleanup crew is here, removing the leftover things that people didn't take with them. The encampment is over. Lockwood said the protesters were given warnings by police before they moved in. Quote, the police got here a little before 5:30, and they told the occupants that it was time to go. They made an announcement over PA systems, so there could be no denying that people heard it at 5:33, 5:43, and at 5:47 they were given a last warning. And then whoever was left at that point, Wayne State University police moved in and kind of ushered everybody off of campus. Why would he say kind of? Anyways. Lockwood said there were 12 arrests made by Wayne State Police. The detained protesters were released Thursday afternoon after being held in the Detroit Detention Center, greeted by demonstrators who were advocating for their release. In a statement Thursday morning, Wayne State University President Kimberly Andrews Espy said the encampment was causing safety problems and intruding on the rights of others. The university had expressed concerns the protesters were swiping campus items such as traffic cones to use for their encampment. What? Since the encampment was established on May 23rd, it presented legal, health, and safety and operational challenges for our community, said Wayne State University's president. Oh boy. In each conversation, now that's tricky because they were very reticent about talking. In each conversation, we reiterated that the occupants were trespassing on university property, and we asked that the encampment be removed. No individual or group is permitted to claim campus property for their own use and deny others access to that property. The encampment also created an environment of exclusion, one in which some members of our campus community felt unwelcome and unable to fully participate in campus life. Quote. SB added that Wayne State Police made repeated amplified announcements to allow everyone time to gather their belongings and leave. Many people left. After the police action, demonstrators marched around the campus with police guarding some entrances behind yellow tape. They alleged that police were being abusive during the arrests earlier that morning. At about 8:45 a.m., U.S. House Representative Rashida Tlaib and others gathered outside an entrance off Anthony Wayne Drive that was blocked by a wall of police behind yellow tape. Tlaib and some family members of a student allege that the police had pulled off the hijab and Islamic headscarf of 19-year-old student Nazimia Adabra of Dearborn during the police actions Tuesday morning. A man who said he was the uncle of Adabra, Louis Abuelinian, 55, of Dearborn, said he saw video of the incident. Lockwood did not immediately comment on the allegation. Quote, "You took her Islamic headscarf off," Tlaib said, her voice breaking up with emotion, told a police officer guarding the entrance. "Do you care anything about them?" The uncle then started talking to the officer in a loud voice, mocking the tall officer as a big, tough guy compared to a woman, quote, half your size. It's unclear if the officer Tlaib and the uncle were yelling at was the officer involved in the alleged incident. Oh my god. Oh my god. Free press, get a spine. Get a spine, guys. Speaking to reporters who then gathered around him, the uncle said he's even more upset over the thousands killed in Gaza in recent months. Quote, "We want America to tell us how many kids should we sacrifice before it's enough for the world to be satisfied," he said to a scrum of reporters around him. A video that appears to show the incident showing the student was posted Thursday afternoon by a former reporter with CBS Detroit that was shared on the Instagram page of one of the groups that organized the tent encampment, Students for Justice in Palestine at Wayne State University. The video shows a woman on the ground with an officer who appears to be patting her head as the hijab slips backward, partially revealing some of her. Oh my god, okay. This is that passive tone that the press has really been using post October 7th, just coming back again. Oh boy. I need to fast forward through this. This is actually really bad. This is offensive. Detroit Will Breathe, an activist group that often demonstrates against police abuse, issued a statement on Instagram calling for police to release the protesters who were arrested. Other activists and Arab American groups based in Metro Detroit released statements condemning the actions of police, saying it's part of a pattern of attacks on pro-Palestinian protests, and that much is true. I'm not gonna get into this whole article. This is actually just. This is drivel. This is really bad. So I'm just going to end with this final part, right? So the protesters at the tent encampment have been calling for divestment from Israel or companies tied to Israel and ending police training in Israel. Divestment from Israel in Michigan may be a challenge because of a 2017 law in Michigan that prohibits the state from having contracts with anyone who supports divestment from or boycotting strategic partners of the United States, such as Israel. Representative Tlaib had called upon SB to meet with the protesters in a video she posted on Instagram earlier that week. The encampment is one of several set up at universities across the U.S. after protesters at Columbia in NYC set one up. That camp was cleared and shut down by police. Police shut down a similar camp last week at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So that's the full context to catch you up to where we were when we started this episode and where my head was at when it was time to edit. between the audio and just the um, personal distress and political confusion that causes, I wasn't sure how to best present this to you as the listener. And I figure rather than try to figure a way out to present these things, how about I just show them as they were? So, with that, we'll get into our field report from John, Boom Man, and I hope that the reconstruction of some of our decayed audio for this episode isn't too distracting. So, with that, we'll get on to the episode.
After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
All right, folks. Well, welcome back to our first episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting in what has been about 2 months, I want to say, right?
Yeah, about. It's been a minute.
So, yeah, I'm here with John today. We will be getting into a slight retrospective as well as a current state of the various pro-Palestine campus encampments. Before we start the episode, I think we actually have to acknowledge just the state of, oh my God, I don't know how else to say this, the monstrosities going on in Gaza right now, right? So, shit, dude. Like, I mean, there's no good way to say this other than like, having it reach a point where the violence is on people in refugee camps.
Yeah, I mean, like the violence that we're seeing is honestly, I think something we've almost never seen before. Like Rafah was just invaded not too long ago. I think like the checkpoints and everything that's going on with the Palestinian people. It's honestly like horrendous.
Right.
And I think that's I think it's really important when we're talking about these protests to kind of like center the conditions of the Palestinian people, like first and foremost, right? Like, which is, kind of the whole point. These protests aren't like just blind random protests. They are divestment campaigns. They're trying to stop various schools from participating in like business and investments and whatnot that ultimately help the state of Israel, right? So that's kind of like the point of the protests. And in terms of like the state of the protests, I think they're
real
awesome.
quick,
Yeah, sorry.
I do agree with that. I do agree with that. Get into this because this is timely, and I think this does tie back to the goal of encampments and protests, right? So, the IDF crossing into Gaza, specifically. Oh no, let me rephrase that. I fucked up. So, Israeli forces crossing into Rafah specifically was denoted as a red line for a variety of Western leaders, specifically Joe Biden in this case, right? Crossing into Rafah would be like the red line where he'd be like, okay, Israel has gone too far. From what it looks like, the administration continues to kind of twiddle its thumbs in response to what is now a new escalation and a new. I mean, I don't know if it's just so barbaric that language ceases to capture it at some points, right? But this is asymmetrical.
Yeah, it's honestly a travesty. Like I don't like there's not a lot of words to really describe. And honestly, even when doing research, even when doing my reading on it, it's like you can read about like what's going on all you want to, but I think the thing that really kind of helped me open my eyes even wider was kind of going to these encampments and looking at some of the programming that they have. Like we watched documentaries and videos of firsthand accounts of the genocide going on, and like putting names to faces, watching. I don't want to say watching the children get hurt because that's obviously not something you want to do or something I would have people do, but I don't know, just like putting names to faces, humanizing the victims, I think, is one of the most important things we can do, because I feel like even from the progressive point of view, when we are like kind of describing it or watching the news, a lot of times it really is just like a score. You know, it really does seem like it's like a score at the end of a game where it's just IDF killed 20 more thousand people as opposed to like putting names
Right.
to faces and humanizing these victims.
Yeah, especially when, the Palestinians have been rendered faceless by propaganda and various forms of Hasbara, right? So it's quite tragic, but it's also, inspiring to see that there is a new wave of, I mean, people around the world basically, right, who are trying to counteract this narrative of facelessness.
And I think that's
Meanwhile,
amazing. Yeah, it's awesome that
yeah,
they're like removing that air faces. I just want to reinforce that. Yeah.
absolutely. There's another thing that like I feel like we have to talk about this before we get into our discussion, right? Which is, so you know how I think a few months ago Biden was talking about setting up a pier for humanitarian aid in Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah, that pier has basically broken up because and floated away.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I was never confident that the pier would be, used for humanitarian aid in any significant sense, but it's like every gesture by the Biden administration at this point has been so hollow that it's just created like this real justified, like, why do I care? Why do I care about this anymore? Why should we continue to feed into this narrative of evil for the Dems, it's all over? Because at this point, like, there is a kind of similarity between the Democrats and the Republicans at this point when it comes to support for Israel. The only difference being this kind of topical lip service to humanitarian intervention and humanitarian aid. We're kind of just seeing, like, dismantled and not taken seriously at every step of the way, whether it's aid workers attacked, whether it's uh, aid shipments being destroyed, or whether it's this literal, PR bugbear that was set up to be like, look at how seriously Biden takes this, is literally floated away in the water.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at an article now that you've mentioned that, and I'm like reading about it. I can't even fathom. Like I'm trying hard not to laugh. Like apparently it only lasted 2 weeks before it began falling apart. Like 2 weeks was the best they could do.
Which is like, again, it's like, does art imitate art? Because it's like, that is so perfect to describe like this liberal lip service to, like, no, 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 we do care about the Palestinians. It's just, you need to be measured. You need to be realistic. And then the realism that they try to offer is
It's
it's
genocide.
it's, it's
Like
nothing
that's
it's nothing concrete. Yeah, it's
yeah,
basically like
like
a failure to deliver aid, even if it's not directly causing the harm, enabling and abetting it.
yeah, and it's not, and it's like at the end of the day, the Palestinians are being shot at with our guns, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
from my point of view, I kind of view it as this is almost like an American genocide. Like we're the main ones funding Israel. We're the main ones, like putting these weapons, putting these guns into these people's hands. At some point, you just have to just bite the bullet and just say that our state is responsible.
also, I just always find it funny that who has kind of made Russia to be this kind of foreign policy bugbear kind of forgets that, like, Russia's a partner in propping up Israel.
Yeah.
So that I
Uh,
always find that a little bit funny. I'm not trying to be this guy, but you're definitely right. Where it's like these various, what we call the white countries, what we call the West,
the
like,
Western Imperial Corps.
right, right. Like, what do you want to call information is like is chiefly, responsible for supporting and aiding and abetting the the legal cover by which all of this has been happening for many years now. And the whole point of the encampments, right? Which is that if American students see the hypocrisy and they see that country is complicit in this, even if they're not directly perpetrating and prosecuting it, you know, it deserves to be bemoaned. It deserves to be called out. And I think the response to these correct are very telling for where we're at in this kind of like global rightward shift, but also how effective the culture war has been in propagandizing people to kind of simp for Israel in a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that like there's just a ton of propaganda that's like being poured out of Israel. Like from like blatantly mistranslated videos to just honestly altered and just outright lies. Like the propaganda is thick and it's a lot to have to sift through. Like it's I don't know. It's hard to I don't know. It's just so hard to put into words.
It
Um
we I had to like edit some of this stuff out of like a previous episode, but also like I've talked to people about this where it's like, does the Hasbara apologists or like the real like Israel defenders have kind of taken this rhetorical strategy of calling any and all criticisms of Israeli policy writ large as anti-Semitic. We get caught in this rhetorical game of tone policing, right? Where it's like, you know, I anti-Semitism, which we all should. But what Israel is doing is barbaric. You know what I'm saying? Like you
yeah, I
qualify
always
yourself 10 times over just to like express the injustice.
Yeah, I always laugh at people who say that these protests are anti-Semitic. Like that was Joe Biden's like line when this
And
first
this
started happening.
was
When this happened at UCLA, his whole thing was we need to stop these anti-Semitic protests, right? But like when I went to one of the encampments here in Michigan, it's like one of the first I came on like a Thursday afternoon, or I think it was a Friday or whenever, I forgot the day. But like it was I got to see for the very first time a group of Jewish people like praying and doing their what's it called, Shabbat, I think.
right,
And
right.
they sang song. It was the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Like calling these protests anti-Semitic is like a slap in the face. It's just so unbelievably goofy because like they're nothing but accepting of Jewish people. It's the state that's the problem. It's the Israeli state. It's the people who are propping up this apartheid open air prison essentially.
Right. And I think we kind of like ignore two big constituencies within like the pro-Palestine camp more largely, right? Where to like we are ignoring willfully the Palestinian diaspora that's had to flee abroad and has kind of witnessed not just their own people, but in very literal senses, like their own family members and people who look exactly like them facing violence. And then seeing people in the United States, especially if you live there, defend it. And then the other big, this is like a big contradiction that no one's talking about because it's inconvenient for advocates of Zionism in the US, but it's like they have nothing to say in response to things like, the massive protest that Jewish Voice for Peace put in like uh um in the train station in New York, right? They have nothing to say about Jewish Americans and various Jewish intellectuals, advocates, activists, all people from all walks of life, basically saying like this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this to happen.
It's crazy because like that happens all the time. Like there's a huge chunk of the like actual Jewish population that are like staunchly anti-Zionist, and like from what I can tell, every single time I bring that up to like some loud Zionist, they usually say something along the lines of, "Oh, they're not real Jews" or whatever. But like it's just goofy. Like
It's
there's
always
no
qualified
real
with some stuff like that.
yeah, there's no real like analysis. There's no real breakdown of like, oh, these people share my values and still disagree. Let's talk about it. There's none of that. It's just
What,
immediate
which is a
invalidation.
really it's a really interesting facet of like liberal discourse where people like deem whole demographic cohorts as like leaning a certain political way, right? Like the way like black people are kind of typecast at large as like unconditional voters for the Democratic Party,
If you don't
or
vote for
like, you
Biden,
know,
you're not black, baby.
right. I mean, it's like you're literally seeing the fetishization of that in real time, right? So it's insane.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's really intense. But that's why, I mean, protests like these, especially with like this new current. Well, I don't know if it's new because I don't think BDS is really all that new. But with this current of like BDS and campus protests, it kind of gives me some hope for the left in America. Not a lot of hope
Mhm.
because ultimately we are still powerless, but it gives me some hope that like there is a real change. So like I know that these campus protests, I don't know if they're specifically like a part of BDS, but I know BDS is like a really important thing that's like um talked about and actively like advocated for at these protests.
And also the thing about the BDS campaign, because I think we've just encountered so many like bizarre critiques of it. The thing about the BDS campaign is like it's trying to absolutely work within the confines of what is acceptable and like legal protests within boycotting consumer goods, because if everything you do is at the point of sale, then choosing not to buy certain things is within your rights, right?
Right.
Divest, take your investments out of these things. And then sanctions, that's encouraging the United States to take its, which is again, it's like, if the United States government can decide who in its trade bloc gets to have trade and who doesn't, then it should get to impose those. It can impose those for a variety of reasons. Why not do it for something decent, you'd say, right? But I think what you're seeing, like, one, the American right, especially like you're seeing in southern states where like there's just like it doesn't make sense why, unless you examine the links between like the Christian right and Zionism to an extent, right?
Yes. That's kind of what it is ultimately. Like I don't think
Yeah, it's
that
like you have like weird like BDS laws where it's like you cannot like, swear dual loyalty to like the state of Israel to get a job in certain places. Like just a bunch of weird stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, in terms of like, so the campus protests in and of themselves, they have like, I usually just say that they're a part of BDS, but I'm not really entirely sure, but um, they are more for the divestment. I think that's their big thing, like divestment. Boycotting, I'm kind of on the fence about, honestly. Like boycotting can be helpful, but it's definitely not the end all be all. Divestment and sanctions are like the big thing for me personally.
Hmm. And I think that
Which
was
is
the
what
big ask at like the UCLA and then like NYU amid a lot of the other campus encampments, right? Which is that we're doing this to protest our university's investment and involvement in the Israeli occupation, whether it's, research for arms, whether it's literally trying to invest in property in Israel or whatever the case might be. This kind of there's always a tendency to maybe dismiss certain protests in the United States as like feckless or kind of, unclear in hands. And there's validities to that critique at times, but I think in this particular case, just writ large, and your experience and observations, something that's been very impressive to see is the clarity of demands at some of these protests, as well as the message discipline and inability to take the bait from outside agitators.
Oh, absolutely. The I was actually genuinely surprised. Like, so before actually, let me back up a little bit. Before I really get into it, I
Hmm.
want to give like a very brief, not over encompassing timeline of kind of the campus process and what's been happening. So just want to say it started off with I think UCLA in um, New York, Columbia, and they
UCLA is in
set up.
California.
I mean, I don't know why I said New York. I'm dumb. UCLA
Well,
in
no, because
California,
NYU kind of so.
NYU and UCLA, but they in Michigan, the very first encampment was done after I believe it was UCLA, and they set up the encampment at U of M, University of Michigan Ann Arbor. Um, they I wasn't specifically there when they set that encampment up. It happened so quickly though. It happened so quickly. I heard about it in a DSA meeting. I saw about it online and I heard about it in the DSA meeting the next day, and I decided to visit. And like you said earlier, the demands were like the students were so organized. Like I don't know how else to put it. The students were incredibly organized, and like their demands were just clear as day, very obvious, very clear. There wasn't any like it was unified, which was incredible. Like lots of different people, but at the same time, everyone sat down and all agreed that like we're all here for the same reasons. So that I think is another kind of blessing and curse. Like it's a problem and a thing that probably needs to be fixed when it comes to like unification and making sure that everyone is like on the same side. Because there can be a lot of infighting sometimes, but it's high stakes, high octane, whatever. But I was really proud of the students for having the everything be as organized as it was, and also being able to put out their demands in a fairly democratic way that's kind of like respectful to the Palestinians and everyone. It was just very well done. I could praise the encampments forever, honestly.
Yeah, and I think get into the specific experience of the Ann Arbor encampment, right? So most of this took place, which has already been like a kind of historic site for just a variety of like student and community protest movements within the city of Ann Arbor and Michigan more broadly. Um, Buying the quad really like puts it front and center for the student body, right? Where it's like you got to cut through the quad to get to the city to get to the student center. So it puts like the issue back to the front and center, which I think is a big challenge for something like just like getting a ceasefire or getting Israel to de-escalate the conflict, which is like how long this has been going on and how short the American attention span has become. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People were able to pay more attention to like the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef than they were to this.
Honestly,
And it's
that's something that's so unfortunate. Like the fact that the that beef happened at the same time as this U of M encampment is just so unfortunate because like I know so many people who didn't even hear about the encampment but can sing every single lyric to the song, and it's I don't know, very unfortunate. The
not to be preaching uncles, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like we did enjoy it, but like
I was
it
gonna
was
say
one of those things where it's just
yeah, no, I was just trying to say, I was like, I did have fun, but also there's bigger fish to fry. No, go ahead.
it's like, yeah, young bloods, a lot of y'all paying attention like beef, but you should be liberating the Palestinian people. You heard? Like I'm not trying to be like that, but
Yeah, I probably you can like two things at the same time, but still, it's just kind of it is a little unfortunate just knowing how many people knew about the Kendrick Lamar thing and not enough about the encampments. But um,
right, and it's like even with this recent on Rafa, right? Like one of the big, I mean, it's the kind of thing you're not even supposed to say in polite society because it's a little too gauche, but like you can't help but think it, which is like, did they with it because they knew that American observers would be trying not to pay attention during Memorial Day weekend?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me,
You,
honestly.
and it's like that's the thing is like I can't say any of that definitively. I'm not going to say any of that, but it's like it's just the kind of stuff where it's like going on for such a long time, and then this idea of like fatigue for certain issues actually does play how people organize for certain things, right? So and I'm gonna get to the main question in a sec. I just wanted to like tie this to certain things we'd seen. So like the undecided campaign in Michigan, for example, right? One of the big
Yes.
that was that someone in the journalism sphere was like, "Hey, yo, like they're talking not reporting on this so they can focus on the Democratic primary. We need to like get eyes on this, so let's like start this like the campaign, so we can kind of get Biden's attention with this, and also like kind of stress like, hey, there is enough in minority communities across the country to like prove like, hey, you have a sizable constituents in the Democratic Party that like has something to say about this, right?
Yeah,
So
the non-committed campaign was also just an incredible thing. Another thing that I got the privilege, I actually got to work on. I got to phone bank and do a little bit of organization when it came to the phone banks or the uncommitted campaign, and it was honestly just an awesome thing to see people openly just like shitting on Joe Biden because of the genocide. Awesome, just 10 out of 10. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that note in there.
oh no, you're good, because it's like we have to talk about this like collapsing disposition on civility, because as much as like liberals and the Democrat may demand it of their constituents, this contradiction, and we've talked about it before on the show, where it's like people are not wrong and something of their elected officials. We can't continue to decry that. But I guess the main question I wanted to ask, tying this together, oh my god, what were the reactions you saw from people walking by the encampment?
Oh
Well,
man,
things you'd seen from students. What were like?
I could
What was
I could write a book.
Go on, go on.
So okay, at the U of M encampment, I got to help with a little bit of organizational stuff, a little bit of logistics, bringing stuff in, taking stuff out. But I was mainly there for night watch. I was mainly there for security. My job
Mhm.
was to essentially, I was assigned a post, or actually, I signed up to be on the post, but ultimately, I called out police presence, called out counter protester presence. It wasn't necessarily my job to interact with police or protesters, although sometimes I just had to. Not with police though. I would never do that. But with protesters, one of the main things they had us focus on was just de-escalation. Like some of the protesters love to get rowdy and yell and be super annoying. This mostly happened like later at night when they knew that we were trying to sleep. There was
Mhm.
an issue with like apparently someone, or it was told to me that someone like tried to get into someone else's tent, which is why that like Night Watch was so heavily wanted at U of M. Um, so my job was essentially standing around and making sure everything was good. So I got to see kind of the front lines of the people walking by. I got to see the reactions of police officers, and it's a very interesting mix. Like, so let's start with the positive first. There were some
Yeah.
genuinely like positive people, and that luckily was a majority of the people that I got to see, right? That was
Okay.
luckily a vast majority. Most people are obviously college students or college bound or college adjacent, and they all are aware of the situation that's happening. So there was a lot of just outspoken community support, which is fucking incredible, right? Like I love the support, the fact that I was sitting there reading a book while on shift because there wasn't a lot going on, and a lady walked up and showed me a picture of her on the diag, the exact same spot the camp is at, and except it's a picture of her at a Vietnam anti-war protest, which was just awesome. You get to see there were at Ann Arbor there was just a lot of old people that came out and was like, yeah, man, I did this in my day, it's your turn. And that is just honestly the coolest thing in the world, right? I think that was like the best of the best that I got to see. We got to see some union guys come through
Young
with
guys.
I can't do the voice. I need to get that voice down.
See, the problem is you haven't watched The Sopranos twice. Once you watch it the second time, you got it. You got it.
But yeah, I need to just hurry up and watch the whole thing. I need to like boof The Sopranos. But no, the at the encampment though, there were just a lot of really awesome people coming through telling us stories about how, they were there protesting the same thing, and to them it felt like passing the mantle, which was awesome, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um Most people, a lot of times it's just people dropping off donations, supplies, things like that. It's just great to see. It was honestly great to see. But now we're done with the good. So we're gonna move on to the not good. And there was a
Okay.
lot of not good. Um, the police weren't really the biggest problems. There at Ann Arbor there was some violence from the police. Specifically when we were protesting, when we were doing our chants and everything, there was some violence that broke out there.
Yeah, I
I
saw
don't want to.
the tweet from Rashida about it, and she was kind of condemning the use of chemicals on students.
Yeah, pepper spraying students is just absurd. Pepper spraying students that are at a peaceful protest is even more absurd. Pepper spraying students at a peaceful protest that's specifically for anti-genocide is just I don't even no words essentially.
Which is overwhelming, like, narrative about the campus encampments, right? It's just that they have peaceful, they have actually been, like, pretty tame as far as, civil disobedience. And there's even that, like, somewhat, it's just crazy that this came out, like the state NYPD on the NYU encampment when they tried to break it up, where they were like, yeah, NYU kind of overdid it by calling us. We still beat them up though, but, like,
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're admitting to being the force that is obsessive.
like if NYPD is like, yeah, I go hold you, we
Like
did
we
our
fucked
job,
up.
but we did our job, but, like, you didn't really need to do all that.
Like yeah, literally, it's like y'all didn't really need to call us. We still fucked them up though, but like y'all didn't need to call us. Like that's insane. But
But you're saying
yeah,
with Ann Arbor PD, the
yeah. So the
tendency
cops.
was to, like, go for it.
Well, no, so for the cops, the tendency was to just kind of leave us alone and let us do our thing until it was time to raid. For when like I said, the only time there was like a severe amount of violence mostly came from the police side, specifically during protests, right? So generally they were annoying. They were very show of forcey. They stood out there in all their platoons and whatever the fuck, however they organize, and they were annoying and they sucked. But ultimately, there was only I think 2 cases of violence, and that last case was them tearing down the encampment.
Yeah, and
So
you'd
it's
shared, like, a pretty violent picture of it. I'm almost tempted to make the episode art.
no, if you want to go for it. I mean, it's not my picture, but I'm pretty sure it's not anyone's picture. I'm pretty sure it's just on someone just snapped that. But
Yeah, my main problem is, like, one, it looks like, the album art for now from a certain angle. So, like, I'm already like, okay, weird. But then also just, like, I don't want to, like, put that album art. It's like, here we go, greenhouse lighting and anti-student protest. Like, that's not the context.
right. Don't do that. Yeah, no, but yeah, the police, like I said, the police weren't really, I don't think, the biggest issue. The biggest issue, I think, or from my point of view, I'm not going to speak from the whole camp's point of view, but from my point of view, as a person on Night Watch, the biggest problem was definitely the counter protesters.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the biggest um, key differences between Ann Arbor and Detroit. It's that Ann Arbor's encampment was done during graduation. So there was tons of foot traffic onto the university. There's tons of people moving to and from various buildings, trying to just figure out where things are. Families on campus. It's just a lot of foot traffic, right? So
Right. And, like, that was something that it might be like an obvious question, but do you think that with the immediacy of graduation and then more likely the fact that the university doesn't want the protest seeping outside into the real world because of graduation, did that play into the decision to kind of escalate on the encampment?
So yes and no. I think that the fact that this was happening during graduation definitely was an important thing in terms of strategy from the university as well as the campers. I think that graduation from the campers' point of view was a very interesting piece of leverage almost, in that the students had access to the entire building, students had access to the entire campus, and they would occasionally just crash graduation because they felt their demands weren't being heard. So it was able. because of the fact that graduation was on campus, they could leverage that. They could use that as a source of militancy to press the issue, which I thought was very, very interesting. On the flip side, though, militancy breeds repression, which breeds more militancy, right? So
Yeah.
once commencement was being crashed, once graduation was being crashed, once people started chanting, it's like people just lost their fucking minds. Honestly, there's videos of security and police just putting their hands all over student protesters. There's like you could see like people, it's just people yelling and shouting, and like half the time the students in the ceremonies were on board. Like you don't I feel like the media doesn't really cover that at all ever, but when I was there, at least, or when I wasn't there, at least, the students in the chanted with us. So it's very odd that one, that doesn't ever actually get covered, and two, that it's very much a faculty versus the students kind of mentality. But yeah, no, graduation definitely was a factor in terms of strategy for, I think, both sides, as the university ended up getting more violent and the students ended up realizing they could get more militant.
Right. And I think like with the faculty piece of it, I know that faculty is somewhat divided at a lot of these instances where the encampments have happened. I guess where do you make things out in terms of like academic staff, like the professors, administrators, and what have you? It seems like overwhelmingly university administrators are kind of already in the tank for shutting this up. And then professors are kind of hit or miss depending on their department on this. But
Yeah,
what was your
that's pretty much my observation. I do know that some professors are cool with the movement and were proud of their students for stepping out there and doing what they needed to do. But ultimately, I do think that a majority of university staff are all going to be very anti, protest, very anti. No, I don't want to say anti-Palestinian, because like I feel like that might even be a stretch. The I don't think that any of the teachers and whatnot are like pro-Israel. I just think they're more pro-status quo, pro-peace. And I think that can be just as detrimental as,
just the
being
usual
defiant.
not in my backyard kind of stuff?
Exactly. Yeah, it's the exact same, that kind of thinking. I think that was a thing uh that was definitely a problem that a lot of the faculty members probably had. Um, but for the most part, I do think that university professors good, faculty, staff, and administration bad. I think that's the general consensus at Ann Arbor. But with that foot traffic, though, the amount of people I saw just running around with Israeli flags and just being just absolutely insane. I had early in the morning, one of the because like I usually took the shifts that was like 3 to 7 or something. I stack shift or something. Um, and I remember waking up one morning and there was just an older Zionist guy who who just was there, and I didn't realize he was a Zionist. But he was there, and we were all just kind of chilling and minding our own business until he decides to ask me about, like, what does intifada mean? And I'm thinking, it's just a dude asking questions. He doesn't know what the word means, so I'm like explaining to him, and he
Who don't
comes
know what
back with like
intifada means?
he bro, it was such a mess. He comes back with like another younger guy, and the younger guy is like laughing at pictures of children that have been placed around the encampment.
Oh God.
And these children are dead. Like, these children are deceased. They are victims, and he's just laughing at them. And he's like, "Oh, Hamas uses human shields all the time," and like, he's just dumb,
Ah.
annoying talking points. And I thought this dude was normal. I thought this guy was fucking normal, man. I thought he was just a normal guy asking questions. So I'm trying to do my best to like just answer the questions, because in my head he was friendly. But the conversation slowly starts getting more and more not friendly, and it starts getting more and more into like a debate. And so I'm looking for my exit, because I'm like, I'm not here to debate with y'all. Um, and I'm trying to like figure out my shit. And meanwhile, they're like ramping up and like googling shit and trying to come up with more talking points, and it's like I just don't care. Like
Which
it's like
seemed to be like the overall strategy they had, which is like get people riled up and then like try to trigger like this crying blue hair lib moment to like or like God forbid, you make this like justifiably upset person aged, and now you can like cry foul about like look at how violent these people are. Oh my god.
oh man, dude, that was literally all the time. Like there were like you could tell too, like because like some counter protesters would come in and they would like try to debate and argue, and it's like okay, whatever. But like some would go in and they would just like have these flags, and you could tell that they were just there for the photo op. Like you could tell that like they wanted us to beat them up. Like they wanted us to be mad and to yell and to scream and to rip off their flag. But like BDS is a peaceful movement, and like they're all students who are just there to try to inconvenience the school so they can stop divesting. So like, they don't care about your specific pro-Zionist take. Like nothing happened to any of these counter protesters. And since the encampment wasn't a public space, it's not like we were physically stopping anyone from entering. Like the Zionists could easily just walk in and say whatever they wanted to say, and a lot of them did. But some of them just like wanted to be a victim. Like some of them really wanted to like yell, like they wanted to like scream and be obnoxious just to see if we'd flinch at them. And that never
Right.
ultimately happened. It never happened at all, which I
You,
am
you
so
saw a lot
fucking
of that
proud.
get you saw a lot of that get posted. Like, there was this, I mean, they were talking about on Chapo. I don't see this on Twitter anymore, but like there was allegedly this clip of like this one lady like literally like shaking and crying that like no one would debate her, no one would like talk to her at this like encampment or whatever.
That's
Like,
awesome.
yes, I guess one question is like, was that part of like the discussions with orders, or was that like just something that was like heavily in the air of like, don't talk to these guys, don't fucking do it, just stay here and like stay on message.
So one of the cool things about the Ann Arbor encampment was that, well, number one, it was super organized. Number two, it was like they were very conscious of their own image, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
like, for example, when it came to reporters and when it came to the police, when it came to counter protesters, they were very clear in mentioning that like once it turns hostile, walk away. Once it turns hostile, do not engage. We do not engage with agitators. Which I think was awesome. I love the fact that they did that.
Right.
I wish it was followed more to a T. There were plenty of instances where arguments broke out with like reporters and whatever. Nothing got violent from the campers' point of view, but there were just instances where things got heated, and um, they should have just heeded that advice of just walking away. But people just needed to get that last word in. All in all, net positive, but I don't know. Like the counter protesters were by far the most annoying part of the entire experience, and it was so interesting to kind of like deal with them because ultimately they were just looking for a photo op.
It's very interesting that that's who actually pulled up, because I've heard like people talk about it online and on podcasts of like most of these counts were like frat boy types or like college repubs usually. But this victim stuff has been both funny and also just strange to observe, because you saw a lot of like, you see this basically anytime there's any left or progressive agitation in the United States, where like people start fantasizing about a replay of a state. And that's something that I was thinking about in, as you were talking about your experiences with other people, where it's like the older generation can kind of see this very visibly as like passing the baton from like the Vietnam process to like this. And there is like a quality to that that I think is worth examining, and that is like, did this is this current round of civil disobedience doing better than the Vietnam protests? Is it in the same vein? What are its goals versus the conditions in hindsight that I think are very useful to us as students of history and as those of us on the left. You also just see from like the right, the rabid right, more broadly, there's this desire for always, and they kind of like have this fantasy of let's replay Kent State, where like Vietnam War protesters were shot, Ohio National Guard, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that's like these same people who call for blood are also like so beta cuck soy when it comes to like their actual method of confrontation, right? Where it's like, why won't you take the bait? Why won't you get mad at me? Why won't you let me be a victim? And we talk a lot about like conservative victim complex, but that's very interesting to observe and it's correctly.
It's honestly kind of terrifying, like when you like take it to
It must be
its
unhinged
furthest.
to look at. Like these
Yeah, and like when you take their logic and their reasoning to the furthest, conclusion, it's like they're right. Like when you if you look at their logic and you piece it all together, it's like violence would be the answer. And that's the terrifying part. It's like they have this idea where like they think that all BDS is just filled with terrorists, so it would make sense to stop the terrorists, right? Like
yeah,
if
they're
you
kind of acting you to be the person in their head, basically.
Yeah, exactly, and it's such a terrifying thing because like I do think that I would never wish this on anyone. Like I don't want this to happen. I genuinely think that eventually, you're gonna have violence, not even from the state in terms of policing, but from counter protesters. Eventually, like that's just gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah, and
I
I've
don't think
had
it.
I
I
think
don't think it has yet, but eventually, you know.
I think that's the whole thing with the conservatism writ large, right? Like I don't know if I've ever sent you that meme that's like, you know, conservatives be like, "Don't tread on me, my brother in Christ. You have fear in your heart and worms for brains. You'll never see reality until you let go of it." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
But,
pretty
but
much.
it's like it is so fear based and it's so like reticent to examining anything. It's so funny. It's all projection if you think about it, where it's like you sheeple don't think for yourselves and like they believe anything that a head that says it's Republican, they believe all the same things. They talk about I'd fight for my country. I don't shy away from anybody, and then it's like they're basically playing victim complex every time they have to argue or confront somebody. It's insane.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
insane.
There's no
And
other.
it's
There's
like
no. Sorry, I was gonna say there's no other way about it. It really is just not making any sense. I also think it's very interesting that a lot of times like they like to pretend to be like the scientific ones,
that's the
right?
other
When
kind. That's the actually, if you look at studies, blacks are they're not that smart as that you think. It's like the same kind of stupid ass shit. Right?
Yeah, and like they try to pretend to put this scientific front on when and you actually look at their ideology, it's just completely made up. Like everything, like this whole us versus them mentality, the idea that like they're all gonna come to get us. They're all evil and bad. It's like it's not really, and really none of it is. It's all just random bullshit that they just kind of strung together.
Yeah, exactly. It's all cherry picking as an ideology. It's it is um holistic or even approaching reality because they just the same. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to grow. They don't want to see the world change. They don't want to see anything that challenges the reality of the situation. And I think that a lot of conservative ideology is just trying to cope with that. So it's changing things to make the discomfort of looking at it go away, you know?
Yeah,
Which is why it's so haphazard and why it's so ersatz. Like it just like you ever try to like talk to a conservative and it's like that doesn't follow. That you just picked that up, you just made that up. And it's like you can't So you haven't heard this, but I talked about this in the previous episode where it's like, um, I basically don't have it in me to talk to right wingers anymore because many of them have already chosen the path they want to go down. They don't want to build a consensus with you. They don't want to talk to you in good faith. Maybe there's some exceptions to the rule. Maybe there's some people who you can talk to and they can be persuaded or they can, start to see where you're coming from. But there's a certain class of right winger that's like hell bent on telling you like uh reality, but I do. There's no point. There's no point engaging with that person. But it is especially frustrating in today's day and age when so many of those same people now hold positions of authority. Now have to be spoken with like they have a real thing to say. And more broadly, these people use that kind of thinking to justify violence on student encampments, to justify breaking into tents, to justify property damage, all this stuff. It's it's very interesting how in American political discourse we talk about violence and extremism and the breakdown of civility that's always selectively applied to the left. It's never talked about with the right. And I think you see that breakdown post Trump is like the Proud Boys and this new resurgent right wing um just this right wing political resurgence globally, but it's it's so disingenuous and fraudulent. It's like, what are we doing as a
Yeah.
species? What are we doing?
I don't know, man. I wish I could tell you.
So
One of
I guess
the
the
one of the
go ahead, go ahead.
sorry, yeah, one of the counter protesters though, they this dude is legendary in the worst way possible. He would walk up to us. He would target us Night
Oh
Watch
Lord,
guys. He would walk up to us and like he brought these two giant fluffy dogs, and they were so cute and they were so adorable, and I
these
loved them.
fluffy what?
These fluffy white dogs.
Oh no.
And
Okay.
the second you go, oh, can I pet your dog? And he starts hitting you with the lioness bullshit, and it's like I don't know. Like there's kind of protester guys like that where like they just hit you with the I'm just trying to have a conversation. And then there's other guys that just want to come in and yell. Like there was one guy who came in and he yelled about how Israel was, Jewish before, and it was their land and in the Bible they were all Jewish. And then someone was like, "Yeah, they were Palestinian Jews." And then, he essentially just shut the fuck up and walked away. It's very funny to see these guys like operate. Most of them are ultimately harmless, but I don't know. It just takes one. It just takes one to have a disaster, right?
Right. Which it's very impressive and it's very admirable that across all of these encampments, uh, to encourage people to keep their discipline, keep their steel.
Yeah, and they did great because like the one of the only real defenses that the encampment like has honestly is just people, like bodies, physical bodies being there, because we know that they figure that the police won't sweep or raid the encampment when there's a lot of people because that will give them bad press, not because it actually is a good thing or not, but um so when there's more people, there's less time to sweep. So the idea of being disciplined and getting people to come and getting people to camp even though the weather is shit, like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going around the camp, which is very very awesome. I love the discipline and like the respect of everyone there. Um, but
Right.
but unfortunately, U of M did get swept. Their encampment was taken down. And it was taken down in a very violent, unnecessarily like bloody, not bloody because I feel like that's a bit much, but unnecessarily just violent. Like it did not have to be as the pigs did it. I wasn't specifically there when the encampment was taken down, but I have a friend who was there, and she kind of gave me the play-by-play of the whole situation. And apparently, the cops came in and they tore down the medic tent first, so that the
Oh
protesters
gosh.
wouldn't have supplies or anything when it came down to the tear gas, if it was going to come to that. Um, so they tore down that medic tent first. They grabbed a bunch of students. I think 5 students ended up being arrested. Um, and from there, that was pretty much it. Like I can, if you want to use that image of the camp, of the destroyed camp, I think that's a good idea. But just as a remembrance of kind of what was there and why it was there. Also, I think it's really cool that since the police took down the medic tent first, what they ended up, what some of the medics, or I don't know who did this, but someone put up a sign that says like medic first victim last standing, because like the medic tent still was standing at the
Sick.
end, which was, it was pretty, that's
Sick.
pretty hard, that's hard as fuck, right? Like that's sick as fuck. um so yeah, that's kind of,
If I find that picture, I might make it the episode art. We'll see.
I have the image if you need it.
Yo, send that shit. That's gonna be hard as fuck.
Absolutely. So but yeah,
So
so U of M was essentially taken down, and then Wayne State was such an interesting time. I gotta say, I got to
it,
actually
it's
be there.
incredibly it's incredibly interesting how that one came about, because pretty much like within 24 hours of the Ann Arbor encampment collapsing at the hands of the police, you have within 24 hours Wayne State students organizing in solidarity with the Ann Arbor encampment, and then an encampment starting at Wayne State.
Exactly. It was such an interesting thing, because I think one of the more interesting things was that like at Ann Arbor, it really did feel like everyone kind of knew everything, right? It was very, very decentralized, very, like there was a team of organizers there, but ultimately it was like if you could help, you got to help, and you did what you needed to do. um at Wayne State, it's probably like that now, but when it first got started, it's like I didn't even know that Wayne State was going to happen. Like I had no idea that Wayne State was going to be, that the point of the march was to set up an encampment. I had no idea. So I get a text coming from a DSA buddy that's like, "Hey, there's going to be a really cool march at Wayne State in solidarity with you, pro Palestine type shit." So I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm going to go." I I actually it's actually funny. I actually got there like super late. So I had to do that really embarrassing thing where you have to like chase behind a march in order to catch up with the march. Uh which took long because the march is running away. But I eventually caught up and marched and did my thing. But all of a sudden, I catch up, everyone's doing their thing, and all of a sudden everyone's marching in a circle, and I'm like, okay, we're all marching in a circle now. That's interesting. Everyone keeps marching in circles, and then next thing you know, I look to my left and I see someone throw someone else a tent, and they start pitching the tent, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's happening. Like it was so interesting. It was so cool to like be there for that moment. um to just be there, like, watching everyone set up the encampments. Like I broke the line, like stepped out and started helping people set up their tents as people were struggling. um I don't know, being there at the inception is just something that was just awesome. Um, the Wayne State encampment, I think, the vibes are a little different than Ann Arbor. Just because Ann Arbor,
Hey,
uh,
my internet went out, so I'm gonna have to do the rest of this on my phone. So
okay,
apologies, to everybody, for the audio quality. Let me go grab my AirPods real quick.
no worries.
Okay, am I coming through good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. All I'm saying is thank God for Craig, because I should
Did you
be able to just.
how much of what you like did you hear everything I said? Am I good?
From what I understand, Craig should just be pulling all the audio off of this channel, and then
Oh,
it'll
nice.
it'll pull it into an Audacity file for me when I hit stop.
So it'll probably cut me off where I left, but it should get everything you said.
Okay, perfect.
But just for safety's sake, where were we?
That's a great question.
Because yeah,
Um,
the powers that be were trying to get, they were trying to stop this recording from happening, but the revolution ain't gonna be televised, my
right.
brother. It's gonna be podcasted. You
It's
feel
gonna be
me?
podcasted. You're right. The state is trying to stop you from specifically from releasing your podcast. Um. Oh, also, can you extend Music League just because it's due in an hour?
Let me do that.
I know. I'm
Just extend
sorry. I know. I've been
it.
having you.
I
Yeah, just
don't
a few
mind
hours.
extending it for you. I'm extending it for you. It's everybody else. I'm like, y'all getting on my last nerve. Just to be annoying. I'm sorry.
No, but I don't know. Where were we? Oh
So yeah,
yeah.
the Wayne
I
State
guess the
encampment, right? So from
yeah
what I
the Wayne State.
understand is like the fly. Well, so let me just like backtrack real quick because when I got the flyer for the
Mhm.
event, the flyer was like to protest Wayne State's involvement, and then to protest what happened in Ann Arbor. So I don't know if there was a call to start an encampment at Wayne State. So if it happened organically, that's actually sick.
No, I don't think it. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it happened organically. Like I
Okay,
mean, it happened organically in the sense that like students did it. Right, there was no faculty involved. Students got together and did their thing. It
right.
didn't happen organically in the sense that like it was just a march and then it's an encampment. Like it was. This was. I think this was
Right.
heavily planned. Um, I'm in touch with one of the medics that was at the U of M encampment, and she didn't even know that it was going to be an encampment until that morning. So this was definitely something that they were planning for a while, that they kept hush hush, and they did a great job at it. Like honestly, I didn't even know. I had no clue. I think they did a really, really, really good job at ensuring that like no one really knew about what was like going on or the potential, project they were working on, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's actually
Um,
pretty sick that they might have been, factoring in a plan B this entire time.
Yeah, It would be awesome to work on a plan C, but that's something I'm going to talk to you after. Um, when kind of the vibes at I hate saying vibes, I do, but I gotta say the vibes at the Wayne State encampment are also very different than the vibes at Ann Arbor. Not because Wayne State is radically different, but also just because like there's less people on campus. It's not near graduation. I think Wayne State's graduation already happened a while ago. Um,
So now it's the summer
absolutely
semester at Wayne, right?
right. I've seen one counter protester, um, which is so far so good, honestly. And honestly, the counter protester didn't even they weren't even waving like the Israeli flag. They were waving like they were waving a it wasn't Brussels. Belarus. They're waving a separatist Belarus flag, which I had no idea that there are separatists in Belarus. Like I thought that Belarus was its own independent country. So why are there
So
separatists? I need to learn
looks like
more.
an anti-Putin Belarusian is a counter protester for Palestine.
I guess. Like I
Huh.
don't. It was just very weird. It was
Huh.
just very weird.
The
Who would have thunk it?
the more you know, I guess, right?
Okay, how am I coming through?
Much better. Much, much, much better.
Oh my god, I apologize to everybody for the audio quality. I might just have to heavily edit this one.
Whatever works.
Yeah, I mean I gotta edit 2 episodes tonight, which is not bad. So it's a blessing, all things considered.
It's cool you're still doing this, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad I had you on, and I'm actually very glad to be able to talk about this, right? Because just where I was coming at, like returning from India when like I was like basically like miles away when all this was going down, and the crazy thing for me is like, dude, I was surrounded by Israelis for like a leg of the trip.
Oof.
So I was like in deep cover about like, my where I stand on some of this stuff. And it's like I always believe in being polite and being civil with people, but Israelis really are like that. They really are. In Israel, we invent the hummus. Yes, it's true. Lebanon, Syria, I don't know what this is, huh? So, okay, where were we? So,
Comparing I'm just kind of comparing and contrasting
go ahead.
Wayne from Ann Arbor. Um, I love the fact that it's in Detroit. First of all, I think there's a lot of very awesome history that can be had, or that could be, I don't know, kind of fulfilled there, just because Detroit has some very interesting, like, revolutionary, awesome history when it comes to protesting and like direct action, things like that. Um, Wayne State, I feel like both of them, they kind of, another very interesting thing is that a lot of the encampments between Wayne State and U of M, they ended up like sharing organizers.
Mhm.
Like a lot of the organizers at U of M ended up coming through to Wayne State, right? To their encampment. So it's interesting that a lot of it is kind of like the same people, uh not really the same people, but like the same like vibe, the same feel. I feel like the encampment is doing a great job at like making people feel welcome. Like, for example, I know for a fact yesterday they kicked out like someone who made like transphobic comments. Like they're really good at like ensuring that people feel safe, ensuring that everything is good. Um, but ultimately, yeah, I think the biggest difference between the two is just the fact that there are much less counter protesters because of the fact that it's not near graduation. Another difference, I guess, between the encampments is that they are the police forces being used, which is something I think is a little terrifying. Detroit police are terrifying. Like they're legitimately like violent and scary and insane.
Yeah, and it's like for anyone who doubts that, just read through Detroit I Do Mind Dying and look at um how the Detroit police of yesteryears has been described in that book.
Yeah,
It is much like the police force in any American city, brutal
yeah.
to put it bluntly.
Honestly, they really are brutal. So I'm very curious as to how well this will be received, or how the police are gonna deal with this. I genuinely pray it's done in a humane manner, but we all know that's not gonna happen.
Well, part of me also wonders to some extent, right? Where it's like Detroit itself sits in a not that Ann Arbor isn't diverse in its own right, but the metro area is far more diverse in its own right. You have a bigger um Arab and Muslim population, so that factors into like the optics of how you handle this protest, and then even broadly, right? Like I'd say that the uncommitted campaign, did well in the metro area, right? So I'm kind of wondering that whether or not it factors into law enforcement's plans. It probably played some strategic sense to the organizers to bring it to the metro area. Because even if, Wayne State as a university is just as hostile to the encampment as UMich Ann Arbor is, the demographic conditions and the specific geographic conditions of Detroit may be more useful.
Maybe, I mean, Detroit is it's a very strategic location because of its closeness to Dearborn. There's a
Right.
lot of Dearborn has one of the largest Arab population outside of the Middle East ever.
Well,
So
I would just say
like
within the United States. How about that?
I said one of the largest. I didn't say the largest, but
Yeah.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
It's obviously not the largest. No, so I think Detroit is important because of its closeness to Dearborn. It's important because I think that we'll find a lot more support. Not that I'm not too sure about the politics within Ann Arbor, but I know that Detroit is a very uniony, bluish place. So I think that in general, I think support will be better. I'm just again, it's honestly I'm just more worried about the police just because of the different the officers being used here. I know that Wayne State, one of their biggest, I keep trying to not say one of their biggest strategies in terms of defense is just simply numbers, right? That's just piling on
Yeah.
as many people as possible. I think the police told one of the police liaisons at the encampment that they were going to raid. I think a week ago, or not a week ago, like maybe earlier this week. And so they ended up sending out like this huge message to everyone who has ever been at the camp to come through, and they ended up with more than 200 plus people at the camp, and the police couldn't raid, right? So like
Mm.
honestly the numbers are just so important of just getting bodies down there and making sure that they have what they need, making sure they have the tools that they need and the equipment that they need power and all of that good stuff. But it's a time, it's very
Yeah.
interesting. These are interesting times we're living in. um, I really want to see this honestly, I keep trying to say I want to see this encampment flourish and be big, but like I want to see the encampment go away. Honestly, I want to see the encampment go away because the divestment demands have been met, which is just ideal, right? I want no one because Wayne State stopped paying money to Israel. That's kind of the goal, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. As much as I really really want that to.
Right, and I think it's like, there's some stuff coming out in the Detroit Free Press, and even Wayne State made a statement yesterday on the encampment, and they kind of go on this whole, well, the students refuse to talk to us, and it's like we're probably
I need to talk about that.
yeah, get into it.
Because I was there for that. So the administration at Wayne State, I think they sent some people to come talk to the encampment. They heard that they had demands, and so they decided to go and talk to their students and see what's going on. They sent some people. It was not the people who the campers requested. And it was at a really bad time where a lot of the Muslim people in the camp were doing a prayer at a mosque somewhere away, right?
Okay.
So the camp organizers or the people, I don't know if they were actually organizers, the people who received the administration just said, "Hang on for a second, so that we can go." They're doing. I forgot what it was. It was some Muslim thing. I need to figure that out. But
They were doing
um,
Muslimicism.
yeah, man, they were doing. Oh, I'm not repeating that. They were doing some prayer. They were doing some prayer. But they were gonna come back in like 30 minutes tops. The administrators just essentially just walked away. They just left, and now they're saying that the campers refused to meet with them when that is very clearly not the case. Like
Yeah.
that is very obviously not the case. They wanted to wait to make sure that the right people were in the right place, and the administration did not send the correct officer that we needed to talk to. So it's like they're just not arguing in good faith, which is also kind of
Right.
terrifying, which means that the police will get involved. It's like it's a mess. It's a mess. People need to sit down, or specifically the administration faculty need to sit down and like do some real soul searching and like have a good faith conversation with these students. And it's just a thing that's just
Yeah, and I think like one encampment, I don't know, I forget which one, like was able to get um their demands met. I forget which university it was.
I'm not sure either, but I feel like all of them should have. Like I feel like attacking a bunch of students at a peaceful anti-war protest is just absurd. But I guess cops don't feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like it hasn't escalated too far yet, but it's like the reticence to this is it's so hegemonic, right? And I think like Chapo recently had an interview. It was an anonymous interview with like a university communications professional.
Hmm.
where they were basically like, yeah, the universities are doing this on purpose. They are making a conscious and considered effort to do this. The students are right to do it, but they're taking severe risks to do it. Like confirming everything we knew, but just kind of like the ideological hegemony of liberalism at this point has taken on Zionism as this like um it's taken it for granted as one of the good positions to have because that's kind of how reductive liberalism has gotten in today's day and age, which is like what are the right set of things to say you believe in
Yeah.
to fit in with the right crowd, you know what I'm saying? So it's like
Like, please desperately tell
Zionism
me what to
gets you
think.
in. Right. So it's like, Zionism gets you in with the democratic machine, but on principle, the history of Israel and Palestine is far more complicated than merely saying I stand with Israel,
Right. No, I
So I
agree.
think
I think
let's
that
see.
I think
I think it was Rutgers.
oh, Rutgers, their camp.
Yeah, let me see. Encampment 2024. Oh no, they reluctantly ended it. Never mind.
Also, I just want to say,
I'm gonna have to. Yeah, yeah.
I just want to say, I am really bad at camping. Like, I thought camping was easy. It's not at all,
Well,
and
because
I'm
usually,
horrible at it.
you're in a nice spot with like open air. You are in the woods. Nobody's shaking down your tent. Whereas, in this case, you were like, trying to hold down a spot, and you were dealing with just like
Tomfoolery, honestly.
just tomfoolery, shenanigans, chicanery, just scoundrels.
Scoundrels. But like honestly, like don't get me wrong, counter protest was definitely worse than the weather. But like that first week I went to go stay at the encampment, it was very, very nice weather, very beautiful weather, and it was very deceptive how nice the weather was because I went that second day, or I went that second weekend, and I stayed, and it was the weekend where it just rained at Ann Arbor. It just rained
Ooh,
constantly.
I can imagine that.
And this was the first time I had ever set up a tent. Um, this was the very first time I'd done any of that. So I set up the tent poorly, I guess, and it was like in the middle of the middle of the night, just water in the tent. It's freezing cold. Like nothing is going as expected or planned. Um, it was just a mess. It was bad. I'm not even gonna lie, I almost just left early. I'm glad I didn't, but I was tempted. I'm not gonna lie.
So I mean, with this, being said, like this was definitely like a personal challenge, and as well as like for everyone who's been at the encampments, there has been a lot of sweat, blood, and tears put into this, literally, right? So
Yes.
I think, now that we're approaching like about an hour and a half in, I do want to thank you for your field report on the matter and just giving us like, the breaking on the ground coverage that greenhouse gaslighting can only give our listeners, right? But
I mean, more coming. I mean, I do plan on spending a little bit more time at the encampment. I plan on giving more support, and I also have some links if anyone wants to donate or anyone wants to like buy something. I have links for those as well to if you want to support the encampment in a way you can.
absolutely, I think you didn't hear this, but on the previous episode, Sky was like, make sure you like throw money at the stuff you can't like support directly.
Right? Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
because
Right.
because
So
you're because the enemy will, right? They like the fascists, the Zionists, they will throw money at whatever they can.
John, that's anti-Semitic.
What?
That's anti-Semitic. I can't believe
Oh,
you said that.
my bad. I'm
Hey
sorry.
yo, my bad. Hey yo, my bad,
Is
dog.
is real bad.
Like I'm gonna have to heavily edit this, but
What do you mean?
I don't know, just like with the audio errors, and then just me fucking around right now, right? So
I see.
I guess with all this being said, um, I think the question does remain: how effective have these encampments been, both in accomplishing their stated goals as well as changing, the national discourse on Israel and Palestine, as well as maybe gathering concessions from the American state. Do you think there has been a measured effect? Do you think there's been some changes?
Um,
Because I think it's been very worthwhile as an attempt. I never think that any of this is for nothing. But I guess because of the literal sweat, blood, and tears that have been shed over this, what do you think?
I think personally, I think that struggle is important to revolution, right? I think that you need to engage in some sort of struggle in order to fight for your own humanization. I think that that's important. I think that I think the Palestinian struggle is one that is important and one that needs to be had. In terms of the encampment specifically, though, if I'm going to be honest, in terms of like getting concessions and um, having universities stop funding the terror organization that is Israel, I'm not entirely sure if it's effective in that sense. I do think that it is very useful in terms of changing people's minds. I think it's great in terms of, I think, like we said in the very beginning, focusing the conflict and this, situation on the plight of the Palestinian people is incredible and something that needs to be done more. So with that in mind, I think that, that the encampments have done that perfectly. I think that the encampments have been like fundamental almost in like spreading the word out there and to getting people talking about the Zionist state, right? And I think that's a good thing. So in that sense, I think that the encampments are very successful, right? To show students who we would generally think of as like people who are the blue-haired annoying libbed up college student, to see them engaging in this like genuinely awesome struggle against the police in order to stop their tuition from funding a genocide. I think that's an important you know thing to see happen. So
And
ultimately, I
to
think
do so
that
with severe organization, with severe discipline,
exactly.
not giving in to people who are goading them to their worst instincts, and really, I mean, there have been like some really good interviews that have come out from the organizers, and everyone is incredibly well spoken and has a very solid vision for what they're doing. Even if you don't think that this is accomplishing something immediate, I think it does prove that this coming generation is not going to take all the precepts and assumptions of American liberalism for granted. It's not going to take them as gospel. We have a generation that's willing to question things. We have a generation that's willing to speak up against injustice. And I think that's always valuable. Even if it doesn't end the violence immediately, sometimes it is important to declare and set yourself apart with your position.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree entirely. I love the encampments. I love the overarching movement. I love the idea of just sitting somewhere and throwing up your middle finger and saying, "I'm not going to move until you do as I say." I think that's awesome.
Any other closing thoughts or food for thought before we close this one out?
Um, Free Palestine. Go to an encampment if you can and just be there. Like, oh, they have sometimes most of the times they have really cool programs and you can learn a lot. Like, I watch documentaries. I talked with Palestinian people. Um, some Muslim people invited me to do their nighttime prayer, but I got too scared because I don't know what to do, so I didn't do that. But um, just show support. They need it.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely saying that like there was a lot of like learning to be had both formally and informally, like between like like Jewish and Muslim prayers being done at the encampments to like I think you guys were watching documentaries and firsthand footage as well,
Yeah.
and sharing a lot of these stories and stuff. That's always the beautiful thing about in-person organizing, right? Is that you finally like you leave this online space where everything's fake and you can actually like, trade notes in a literal sense, but also like there's that spiritual connection of interacting with other people and building solidarity, not just ideologically, but in a real felt sense. And I think that's always beautiful.
It really is. Like the amount of just different people on the left that I have met, just from just coming to the encampments, like, and they're all like on the left, and they all care so much about the Palestinian plight, and that's awesome. Like you don't see that very often. But yeah, no, it's genuinely a beautiful thing. Also go buy a kafia and I don't know, support Palestine, free Palestine.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to sum that one up. So thanks again for tuning in, dear listeners. We're very sorry for the delays, but we hope you'll forgive us with this recent double release. As always, we got our links in the show description below. As of now, I don't know where we're going to be handling social media, so stay tuned for that. But as always, you can track our updates in your podcast app or on YouTube for the time being, I'd say. And we do have a Twitch, but I don't know when I'm going to start the stream up again.
Do it soon.
Dude, the weather's so nice. I don't want to be like playing video games yet. You know what I'm saying?
Honestly, I'm kind of the same way. Like I haven't streamed in a minute because I've been going to the encampments and everything. So it's like damn, do I want to stream right now or do I want to just
That's what I'm
not?
saying. It's great in the winter when it's like I don't want to be outside. I'm gonna be, I'll chill, play some video games, get the stream going. It's tight.
Yeah, I think I'm. But the problem, my biggest caveat is that like summer I get the best views, summer I get the most views, but it's also the time where I don't want to, or I want to stream the least because I want to be outside and I'm doing stuff, you know.
I don't know because it's like if you lay in bed and you're just on your phone all day in the winter, like that's okay. It's morally okay, I feel like. But then in the
It is.
summer, it's just like in the summer, it's like, bro, like I need that vitamin D, man. This has been another episode of Greenhouse Light. Oh my god, I haven't done a sign off in forever. This has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. It's been me and John today. As always, thanks for tuning in, dear listeners. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. Okay, let's kick the robot out of here. Fuck you, robot.
Fuck that robot.
Fuck the robot. All my homies hate. Actually, we love this robot. Who am I fucking kidding?